It's kind of weird to be talking about Doko Don before I talk about the game that clearly inspired it. But Bubble Bobble was a Famicom Disk System release, also by Taito, and we won't even see the sequel until after Doko Don 2. The title, by the way, is onomatopoeia for the sound of a banging hammer. I guess I could translate it as Bam Bam Bam, but I'm not sure that actually adds anything over the existing title. Doko Don was initially an arcade game, part of a strange little initiative Taito had in 1989 to make some smaller, simpler arcade games, like Flip Pole. The story of the game is that two lumberjacks were cutting down the biggest tree in the forest and accidentally released an ancient evil which promptly kidnapped the king and princess of the country. Naturally, they feel a bit guilty about this, and so they head off to save the day. Doko Don consists of 100 stages, all of which are one screen. If you clear the first 50, then you get a password to unlock 50 harder stages, and completing those gets you the real ending. To clear each stage, you have to defeat all of the enemies. And to do that, you first have to strike them with your hammer by pressing B, then picking up the stunned enemy by walking on top of them, and throwing them with the B button again. When they bounce off a wall, they'll turn into fruit. The fruit is worth points, but more importantly, the fruit helps build your power meter. Well, except for the spotted fruit. That drains it. You can only see the meter between stages and when you pause the game by pressing start. As the meter increases, your throw gets faster. And it changes how your throws affect other enemies. Early on, they'll just get stunned. But as the meter builds, you'll start knocking them out and being able to penetrate through multiple enemies. A maxed out power meter means that your throws go through walls. You can't throw every single enemy though. For some tough enemies, all you can do is strike them multiple times. And on boss stages, which occur every 10 levels, you have to knock out small things to get items to attack with, and then throw them at the boss. If you take too long to defeat enemies, this guy shows up and just sweeps back and forth across the screen. He even shows up on boss stages. Jumping in Doko Don works similar to Bubble Bobble. You can jump up through platforms, but not down. There's never a hole at the bottom either that you can fall through and come back at the top. A lot of the platforms have special properties like causing you to bounce, or slide, or get stuck. Some of them can even be knocked down on top of enemies to crush them. You're really fragile in Doko Don. Any touch of an enemy will kill you, and so will getting crushed by an enemy's shot. You have 3 lives and are given 6 credits by default. But if you enter this code while you're selecting the number of players, the credits increase to 12. You can select the number of players because this is one of those games where there's a 2-player simultaneous mode. Power-ups will appear at random on stages, and they always appear in the exact same spot. Sometimes they'll even overlap on top of each other. A lot of these items look effectively identical to each other. There's potions, and they can either give you 1 more point of power, or make you run faster. The P in a circle always gives you max power. If you die, your power gets reset back to its lowest level. There's 2 types of hammers, one that you can throw, and one that destroys any enemy with 1 hit. The books might either stun all enemies on the stage, or freeze enemies in place only to kill them a few seconds later. The effects of any kind of power-up that endures goes away at the end of the stage or if you die. There's a few other special features on stages to call out. These trees have mouths that you can enter and you'll get spit out at a different place. And when you strike the walls of these rooms, boulders drop from above. I have one problem with Doko Don, but it's a biggie. The hitboxes for, well, everything aren't really great. It's hard to jump over enemies, for example. But where it really becomes a problem is with your attack, which, despite looking like you're swinging in an arc, is really only a small little segment in front of you. So enemies coming at you from overhead will hit you, even if you're swinging. On top of that, you can only hit 1 enemy with your hammer swing. Enemies have a tendency to pile up on top of each other, especially on certain stages with really close quarters. So you'll hit one, and then any other enemies there will just continue on and hit you. And the way that collisions with walls work actually breaks some of the stages. Like here, where you can't knock out these middle platforms because you can't position yourself far enough over. It's worse in areas where you have to jump up through a ladder of platforms to ascend. A lot of the enemies have randomized movements. You have to get right up on top of them to hit them, but they might turn around and instantaneously hit you as you're approaching them. Now, a lot of this can be mitigated. You can learn the enemy patterns and find safer approaches, learn where the gaps are, and work with that. But the net result of all of these hitbox issues is that a lot of deaths wind up feeling unfair. When a shot can come out of nowhere and kill you, irregardless of where you're standing, you're going to wind up feeling like there was nothing you could have done except eat the death. And that isn't a lot of fun. Doko Don has a lot of good things about it, but I feel like the hitboxes just let the game down. And it's not even like they're awful enough to make the game bad. They just make it not as good. There will be a sequel to Doko Don, but it completely abandons the single-screen arcade style. I want to like Doko Don, but I have a lot of trouble working up any enthusiasm for it. This port, which is by the same team that made Abadox just 3 months prior, is kinda rough. My personal preference is for the PC Engine port, which isn't flawless, but it does feel a lot closer to the arcade.